Welcome to Real Booked with Lindsey and Bea, where we reflect on the parallels between bestsellers and blockbusters for laughs and social disruption. I'm Bea Jordan of BlueCouchLibrary.com, and I read the book.
And I'm Lindsay Howie of MyRelationshipWin.com, and I watched the movie. In this special episode, we are interviewing an amazing guest, singer-songwriter and fellow book nerd, Sarah Barrios.
Hello.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
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 So I'm Bea.
Hi. I'm Sarah.
Cool. So I can't see anybody. There we go.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So before we get started, I thought we could do a little hi, how are you? I'm Bea, that's Lindsay, you're Sarah. We're your Real Book. Your music is really cool. I was super excited to hear from your team.
Thank you so much.
And you're a book nerd. I love it.
Born and raised book nerd. Obsessed with books.
Cool. And it sounds like you've been up to here lately with like new music releases and everything else. So you didn't get a chance to finish Ballad of Songbirds.
I finished it this morning.
Did you really? Oh, that's so
exciting. I'm a fast reader. So once they were like, hey, like, we're going to talk about this book, I was like, shit, I need to finish this like ASAP. So I got to like I had a chapter left, and it was actually kind of perfect. For some reason, I thought that this like interview was at 7 a.m. my time. So I got up at 7 a.m. and then I was like, oh my God, it was just in my calendar wrong. But it gave me enough time to finish the book. So I literally finished it like literally 20 minutes ago. So I'm like, oh, I'm prepped, I'm primed, I'm ready to go.
Fresh. Okay, cool. And we were also going to talk a little bit about JK Rowling and Harry Potter, if you were cool with that.
I'm super down. I will always be like super upfront about the fact that I'm like not the most educated person on it because I'm not like a part of the trans community. However, I have seen the tweets. So I have opinions.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, we're not claiming to be authorities in any way, but definitely like trans rights and how can we maneuver through this fandom without hurting people, because that's the most important thing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Agreed.
Great. Did I miss anything, Lindsay?
I don't think so. It sounds awesome. So really it's just kind of, where we want to start. And then I figured we kind of want to wrap up just hearing a little bit more about what's going on specifically with your releases and just give, more people just some more information. So that sounds beautiful to me.
I'm down. That sounds great.
So, you were able to listen to kind of our episodes about the Hunger Games trilogy, and we had talked about wanting to do an episode about the prequel. So when we were approached to have this conversation with you, I got super excited because this is something new for us. We don't have guests. So I would like to know just kind of what your overall reaction to the prequel is and kind of what your basic thoughts are.
I feel like it's been a mixed bag for me. I'm always someone that's like, even if I either like a book or dislike a book, 9 times out of 10, I find something very interesting in it that it like causes me to question it. I'm a very like philosophical person. So I'm always looking for like the question that's in between all of the lines of what the book is about. On first read of the book, I was like very underwhelmed. I was like, I try not to compare them, but naturally I'm expecting some sort of like conversation, and it felt like this book was 90% in Cornelius's head and then 10% anything else. And also like every character that he interacted with in some way also felt super subpar. But I also feel like that was kind of the point. Like, we're getting everything from his perspective, and if everything is super skewed on his end, all of those characters are going to be half versions of who they actually are as people. So I feel like that kind of makes sense. Like, if he had seen those people any other way, his decisions at the end would have probably been different. So on first read, like, would I read it again? Probably not. I probably will, but like, it was one of the few books I read pretty fast, and that one took me like 2 days. And I'm like usually busy, but like for books, I usually am like, no one talk to me for like 6 hours and I can get this done. This one I was like, it like took me a second, and it wasn't because I was busy. It was just because I was like, this is a lot of detail. And it wasn't a lot of detail that like really helped develop the characters for me. However, I feel like the conversation of humanity is the like fundamental running foundation for this book, of talking about whether or not humans are naturally destructive people versus seeing the opposite end of it being, you know, humans can be destructive depending on their environment. If you put assumingly good people into the Hunger Games, they're going to kill other people because that's their environment. Versus if you put someone who's not necessarily the other way around, you get the same outcome. So I thought that conversation was very interesting, and kind of how it felt like the entire book, he kind of was raised with this idea that people were inherently bad, and was raised in the Capitol, and kind of had Dr. Gall as his like tiny little, his own Mockingjay, like telling him things the whole time. And then he had this other part of him that was more for Lucy, where it was like, oh, humans are humans, and like this is like how it happens. But it felt like the entire time he was just like waiting for a reason for this to not be a thing. And I think he kind of made excuses for everything based off of Lucy. And then once he was like, I don't want to do this anymore, this fucking blows, I don't want to be here, I hate it here, this is so horrible, then everything became like the complete opposite. And he was just like, oh yeah, like all of this has been bad from day one, I clearly knew that. And then just got comfy and did his own thing. It's like the idea of like, he preferred his own comfort over helping other people, which is a very right now time. So it's an interesting book. I feel like it had a lot of good questions and good conversations for humanity and kind of the times that we're in right now. But as like a casual read, I like the Hunger Games better, but there was also a ton of action in there, so I don't know.
The Hunger Games felt more focused, like this is about something. It's and just bigger. The scope of everything is bigger, and I definitely understand like why this particular prequel was smaller and more like close to Coriolanus. But it was not a super fun read. No, I gotta agree with you. It felt like first of all, when it was first announced that prequel was going to happen, it was like there was a lot of fan outrage that there was going to be some sort of sympathetic backstory that was going to make us really feel for the villain, like make him an Anakin Skywalker. And I was glad that that didn't happen. But this particular villainy of like everything that I think is right, and if I cross a line, then that's fine because I was right and I had to. It's like really like common patriarchal that's like almost boring because it's like, I know this guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've met this guy so many times. Like, like where's the difference? And then that makes it. That's a really good point.
It's like if you dialed up the regular, just patriarchal nonsense up to 11 and add in some like wealth and murder.
You get Cornelius Town.
Yeah.
The duality of the character was really interesting. So I like that you kind of pointed out that he had compartmentalized like the two components of his life. Because I think that that's another thing that we are conditioned to do. It's really hard to integrate ourselves into a whole being. So it was interesting to see him navigate that, or, you know, not, as it turns out. But the whole concept of, you know, are we inherently good? It really is manipulated by the environments that we are just in and subjected to. So
yeah,
I really appreciate that take.
Yeah, I feel like that's like such a like environment and the people you're surrounded with. I read the back. I really like when authors do that Q&A thing in the backs of the books. I always read those. And she kind of went into like all of the philosophical stuff that she like read in terms of like kind of carrying out the book's like thought process. And she was talking a lot about how like the conversation is, does the environment change the person, or is it just the person's way of being, and do the people around that person change? But I think perception is such a big thing. Like even in my own life, like how my life looks, even if I had completely different views from my parents, like it's all perception because I was told what things were ever since I was born, whether it's my parents or the news or the government or people that I know. Like it's just constant perceptions of other people. And so you're really you're ending up kind of creating your own version of every world, which I feel like is kind of how this one looks for him, where he's just kind of like yeah, they're humans, but also like at the end of the day, I'm the shit, you know? Like
they're human, but not like really.
Not like me human. Like,
yeah.
Well, it's like the concept of us versus them, and you can see how that was instilled from a very early age because of the warring that's going on. And so it's always, you know, one sect of humanity pitted against the other, and so that naturally creates a division, which we can look to the world around us and see the correlations, you know, that people are living through right now. So it very much is, you know, relevant, and things very much are individually constructed. So it would have been interesting to see how he could have navigated his choices slightly differently, as opposed to, you know, what we expect to happen, which is kind of how she wrote it.
right.
I guess I was kind of disappointed at the end with, you know, how things ended up working out, but obviously given the context of the Hunger Games, we knew that he was going into, you know, who he becomes. So it helped to have the background information for me personally of the districts during this time and the way that those kind of evolved into being as well. I'm really excited about going back to the Hunger Games now with more information and seeing how that changes my perspective on a couple of things.
Yeah, I feel like that was really interesting. I really like to see like how the games evolved as well. And like in a way, he still has that kind of like weird twisted version of still wanting to help. Like he's doing it in a way that's negative, but also him giving the district something to have afterwards, because beforehand it was just like, yeah, we're just killing these kids. So and he obviously gamified it, which was, you know, a very negative thing, but in a way it also helped the districts and hurt them at the same time, which I think was the whole point of that control. It was just like, we can help you or hurt you. It's completely up to you how you decide to go with that. But I think that kind of conversation of, you know, us versus them and like having it be like a separated thing, I think very similarly to like what we're dealing with now, it's that idea, especially with him, it's that idea of like the idea of being in that like District 12 and like embracing what it means to be on the run and to constantly be running for your life and not having a home and not having food and having to do everything yourself and thinking that literally anyone could kill you was too much for him to handle. He didn't even make it like a full like 2 hours before being like, I'm out. I don't even want to be here. It's that idea of like, it's too hard. It's too much. I don't like this. This is not my job. Like these people have chosen this fate. Like I don't need to be here. I'm a capital born kid. I've got all of these great things. Like, why am I out here slumming it with all these people? when I could have something else. And it's the easier route of being like, it's easier for me if I do what's best for me. Doesn't necessarily help anyone else, but it's the best option for me. And then that's kind of how it goes, which I feel like we live in a very individualistic society where it's always just like, you know, I, me, mine, where it's like, how does this help me? This is affecting me. Doing something for someone else means that it's taking away from something that I have, which is completely incorrect, but.
But there are a lot of those limiting beliefs that get in the way of people being able to take personal responsibility, to accept different levels of comfort for the sake of being able to, you know, share abundance and be able to encourage other people to grow. But that takes vulnerability and courage. And again, with conditioning and being parts of larger systems which are constantly manipulating and taking advantage, like it's you know, it's a rock and a hard place situation.
Yeah, there's more to enforce it in that sense. Like they've got more money, they've got more value, they've got more control in terms of society, so it's like whatever agenda they're pushing, like it's going to be the one that's heard the loudest until we have one like Katniss.
Right. And somebody like Coriolanus in this situation is, he is in a position of power and authority, and always has been in various levels, in various ways that he's willing to accept. So as soon as it gets past that comfort point for him, it's really easy for him to turn it around and make it that he's being attacked. And I think that that's something we also see so often, that I think that's probably what makes me so tired seeing this villain do this, is as soon as he is uncomfortable, he's being attacked, heavy air quotes, by Lucy Gray, or, you know, what is whoever, whatever, any situation. He's the victim. He's being oppressed, which is absurd. It's like this one little thing made you uncomfortable, and now you're going to ruin everybody's lives around you because you can. You have the means to do so. And hey, here we are.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Well, and that kind of is a perfect segue into kind of the next topic that we were wanting to discuss with, you know, if you do have this platform, and you have a certain fan base and you are responsible for certain messages, like what does taking personal responsibility look like at that level, and what do you do when you completely fuck up, and you know, how do you navigate all of this stuff in
I feel like it's an interesting mix, because I feel like the internet is such a wild place, and I feel like people can say things and it gets taken out of context, and people can say things that are just absolutely stupid and make no sense. And I think the idea of cancel culture is not great, because I think the whole point on educating other people when they make mistakes is to educate them further and be like, you made a mistake, let me call you out on it. And then it's the job of the person who made the mistake to be like, I understand I made the mistake, educate me, like how can I learn more? I feel like that's the disconnect too, is that a lot of people are quick to cancel, and a lot of people who have made the mistakes are quick to like defend themselves, when in reality it's like, hey, like you've made a mistake, it's okay, you can make mistakes. And in a place where everything's online and we're constantly learning, and I feel like the idea of that individualistic kind of culture is being challenged specifically right now because we have social media, where we have other people to be like, hey, that's actually incorrect, have you looked at it from this perspective? I feel like it's very easy for people to be like, well, like I didn't mean it like that, or like, well, like fuck you guys, you don't understand, blah blah blah. And it's like, no, listen, these people are upset for a reason, hear them, try to understand what they're saying, and then kind of move forward with trying to educate yourself. I think depending on what it is, it can be a little bit more difficult in terms of cancel culture. Obviously with the JK Rowling stuff, I feel like people were quick to cancel and like they tried educating and it hasn't worked. I like went through a bunch of her like previous tweets too, like separately from the ones she's recently made about the trans community. And it's kind of like something that she's low-key peppered in pretty consistently on her Twitter. So I feel like in that sense where it's like she's made those little like things and people are like, hey, that doesn't feel quite right. And it becomes something that's just constantly overlooked and there's not a thing. Then times like that where I'm like, people are like canceling her, I'm like, go ahead. Like at this point, if you've continuously tried to educate someone and they don't have any intention of hearing the other side of how people are seeing it, or who, I mean, she's not a trans person. So the fact that we're even having the conversation, like it's not your body. So why do you care? Right. But I think that once she's had people of the trans community and the people in the LGBTQ community and the straight community trying to educate her on like, hey, like this is why we feel this way. This is why what you said felt incorrect or hurt me personally, yada, yada, yada. It's just kind of gone in one ear and out the other. I think at that point when people are like, dude, we tried to help you, help us help you. Like we want this to be a great thing. And obviously a lot of people have grown up with the series. And I'm sure no one wants to be like, oh, this series, the person who created it, like hates me personally, like doesn't want me to be who I am. On top of like, there are still people in the LGBTQ plus community who don't fully accept trans people. And there are people in the straight community who don't fully accept trans people. So on top of that, and the government being like, yeah, no, it's going to be a no for me. I feel like that's a constant thing. And the idea that like someone they've grown up with is now also being like, yeah, actually you don't exist. That's like not an easy thing either. You know, Harry Potter, I feel like has been something for a lot of people, has been something that's gotten them through a lot of like life choices. And the interesting thing is that the book itself is such an all-inclusive book. At least from my perspective, a lot of people have said though, the more you read it, the more you find little pieces of non-inclusivity.
And that's going to happen because people are going to make mistakes.
Right.
Like she's white, she presents as straight, she's this, she wrote this from a certain perspective. Okay. What, in the 90s? Like, yeah, you messed up. Okay, yeah. But she's gone out of her way to say, I haven't messed up at all. Actually, exactly. I was thinking about representation the whole time. Like, no, you weren't.
Like,
no, I wasn't. I messed up.
And she's the queen of like throwing stuff in like halfway through. She's like, nothing in Fantastic Beasts 2 made any sense. No. So like, she was just like, yeah, this makes sense. McGonagall was there, but she wasn't born until 20 years later. Like that.
So, yeah, that sort of coming close to, but not actually committing to being a helpful person or a somebody who genuinely cares and is making an effort. She's just wanting to claim that she was always an ally and whatever that means to her. And right. And so cancel culture can be a problem when it's dogpiling on like a YouTuber or like somebody small, right, who's barely eating out a living off what they're doing, who is willing to hear the other side and make mistakes. That dogpiling is super frustrating to see and is not helpful. Right. But with somebody who's a millionaire because we gave her a platform, it's like, we are just going to take this back now. Nobody needs to hear this hateful thing that you're talking about anymore.
Yeah, I feel like cancel culture only makes sense when the person who you're talking to has no interest in hearing the conversation. I think that's the most important part is like, you know, there's so many YouTubers who are getting called out for stuff that they said when they were 16, and they should be called out, like by all means, call them out. It's what they do with that call out and that information of being like, hey, I hear you. Yeah. Educate. Let's go. But hers has been very clear where people have been like, hey, that's actually really messed up. Like, what do you mean? And she's like made it her thing where it feels like a defense thing. Like, I don't even know how intensely she feels about it. But at this point, she's run with it so far that like, you might as well keep going. And she's just like pushing her own agenda as far as possible. And what's crazy about it is that it has nothing to do with her. And it has nothing to do with her. And you can't be someone who's like, I'm an ally of the trans community, while also saying that being trans is like conversion therapy. Like, whoa, that doesn't like,
no,
it doesn't add up. 2 + 2 is equaling 8 there. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And so I feel like right now where people are like, yeah, no, I'm canceling this one. I'm like, you might as well. Like, you tried educating. And she's like, yeah, sorry, I'm still right.
I mean, for me, like, she was presented with the opportunity to take accountability, and we saw increasingly how she was not only not willing to do that, but doubling down on things that were being presented to her as problematic, and she was provided evidence as to why it was problematic. So it's like, once you get to a place where you're just snowballing in your own lack of awareness, you don't want anyone else to influence your sphere. So you're just gonna, you know, try to buffer yourself from it as best you can and just like lean into what you believe. And as soon as she starts doing that, there's just like, we can't, again, with the power dynamics thing, right? Like, if got the platform and the power, it's really a lot harder to be able to do anything unless you do say, oh, well, we're just going to wash our hands of this and be done with it, because you know, that's the power that we do have, being able to agree on how this is harmful and why, and to be able to commit to continuing to develop our own awareness around things. That's definitely what she's encouraging me personally to do right now.
Yeah, I feel like I would have rather her be like, this is what I believe. Let's open up the conversation. Let me talk to people who are trans and see their point of view, and I have mine, and like have that conversation. At least then it would have been a back and forth kind of thing. And if she still decided it was her own idea at the end, then like, you know, that's all you can do. But there was no conversation. I think even in her like original tweet, she had said something about being trans, and then it equating to like, it's like a gay trans, like it's a gay conversion thing. But even in that tweet itself, it like leads into her own like ignorance, because that's assuming that anyone who's trans is gay, and not everyone who's trans is gay. Like, their sexuality, doesn't like translate with whether or not they're trans. And to like decide for someone else that they don't exist as a person, you can't stand for women and then not stand for trans women. Like, that just doesn't make sense. Like, we stand for all women, no matter what. It's the same thing. You can't stand for women and not stand for Black women either. Like, it's all encompassing. If you're going to stand for women, we stand for all of them. No matter how you got to this point, you're still here. And that's the point, is welcoming those in, and what somebody decides to do with their body and how they get through that. And even if they decide at the end to go backwards, that's still their choice, and you respect that choice. I don't think anyone, whether their platform is huge or tiny, has the authority to decide that someone else is not valid because they personally think that it's a problem, when they themselves have, I don't know, because I don't know who she is. But based on her conversations, I'm assuming that she's never once been like, maybe I am more of a man than I am a woman. And like, I don't know what that feeling is to go through that thought process. So that decision is someone else's. It's not yours to have an opinion on. It's yours to stand by and support them, as a parent should with their child, trying to figure out what they want. And if that decides that they want to, you know, go through the transition, and they do, and it's great. And if they decide to go completely backwards, that's also fine. You know, as long as people are happy and respectful, that's all you can ask for. But I think it wasn't great that she said the things that she said. I think it wasn't great that she's so forcefully pushing it down everyone else's throats. She's not open to having a conversation with the people she's talking about. She's just kind of being like, here's an article I read, here's somebody that I talked to. It's like, well, it's a two-way conversation, so let's have it and let's speak about it and let's open up the dialogue. If you're going to talk about it in such a way and feel so passionate about it, like, open it up, let's talk about it. And she doesn't want to, and I think that's fully blown ignorance. She has no interest in being informed of any other side, and because I think she's getting pushback from the community that also lifted her up, I think she's also angry and afraid and embarrassed. And I find that fear brings out such an interesting person in everyone. And I think that whether she's fully like into this belief or she's just pushing it to push it, I think she's going as hard as she can now because she's like afraid. Like, she's not going to go backwards because then she looks dumb, which I don't think is the case. I think it shows that she's had character development. But I think she's just kind of like, she's pulled a Titanic. She kicked homeboy off of the thing and she's sitting on there and she's like, well, at least I'm floating by myself.
Yeah. It's super disappointing as somebody who did grow up absolutely loving the series. I have a 9-year-old son who also loves the series. And so it's like, I grew up with this whole thing sort of ingrained in my internal landscape, and she made herself such a central part of it that you can't really do Harry Potter without JK Rowling. She's in it all over the place, and so sort of figuring out how to separate and how much I want to separate and what that means. Like, it's hurtful to a lot of it, like me, but more so the people who grew up with it, who are trans. That I do fan fiction. I'm a giant dork, and
yes, let's go. Love it.
Fan fiction is where all the gay is. Like, that's where people who are not represented in the text put themselves into it, and I love that space. And I know that there's a lot of hurt in that community because it is so queer. That I don't know what to do. Like, I think a lot of people are going, I don't know what to do. I don't want to support this in any way, even in fan fiction anymore, because it all contributes to this platform that she's abusing, and we won't stand for it anymore. So I think me and my family are just sort of backing away from the whole thing, and that hurts to separate from something that I grew up loving, but I love trans people more. So that's where
I feel like that's a really tough, it's that conversation of like, is art separate from the artist? And I feel like I've always been someone that's believed that it is. As an artist, like when I make music, I always believe that the second it's out of my hands, it's someone else's, and it takes on a completely different storyline. People will hear a song and be like, oh, this reminds me of my dead grandmother. I'm like, cool, that was about my ex-boyfriend. Like, it's a completely different story to someone else. And, you know, something like the sad song can sound happy depending on the person. So I've always believed that it's separate from the person. But at the end of the day, there's also the business aspect of it, in terms of like, okay, like, I already have all the books and I already have all the movies. But like, if I have kids one day and they want to buy their own books, like, do we support the money going to somebody who like believes that it's not open to everyone? You know, it's okay for the trans community to read her books and to buy her movies, but it's not okay for them to exist and like have a life and like live. And that doesn't correlate. You're down for them to give you money, but you're not down for them to have their own. And that doesn't make sense. It's that whole individualistic thing. And that's a really confusing part. It's like, you know, I have a Harry Potter mug. Like, I'm like, you know, Harry Potter was something that I had a birthday when I was little. Like, it was the first book that I really fell in love with, and so many different characters and such a crazy world that was so beautiful and so open to whatever you were. Like, it didn't matter if you were a blood or if you were like, it didn't matter where you came from, you could still be someone that fought for something. And just to have the person who created it It's so frustrating because it's like the person who created it believes the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you do both at the same time? How do you support the community, but then also support a book series that has been made by someone who is not accepting of that group, but is accepting of them enough that they can take from them.
Profit from them.
I super love that you whispered when you said mudblood, because I always have felt like it's a curse and you're not supposed to.
It's I know. I'm like literally, I'm like, the second I ever say it, I'm like, oh, sorry. I'm like, oh God, this swear. But like that conversation is just like, I mean, that's the thing. The whole like conversation is about like oppression and like people who are being, you know, taken advantage of for who they are and where they came from and their origin story, meaning that they are less than or not worth enough. And it's like, we've got a boy from a young age who's fought from day one and is continuing to fight. And we've got people who have grown up in different homes and in different families and have different feelings and thought processes. And at the end of the day, they're all coming together to fight the largest oppressor of all of them. And that's like such a beautiful story and so real in so many of our historical issues that we've had, you know, with like Nazi Germany and like all of these different things. And to have the person who wrote it also be doing the same exact thing that some of her villains in her books are doing is both upsetting and also like, I should have known. Like, if you can write the villain, you've probably been the villain. So I feel like it's one of those, like, it's really upsetting. And it's like, what do? Do we completely write it out? I mean, so many of us have had it as like a basis. I definitely have had it as a basis of my existence for like ever. And I'm not a trans person, so I can't imagine what that feeling is of being like, you were already not represented in the books. And now you're already not fully includes, like, you're already getting pushback from literally every single group, including the government. And it's like everyone wants to take something from you, and something that you have is like, if you're a reader, like books are something that's yours, like it's your storyline, it's yours. And to have the person who made it be like, no, is like a little upsetting.
It's incredibly upsetting to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And as far as like, you know, what do we do? I mean, that's going to look different for everyone. We all have to figure out what our boundaries need to be around this problematic thing. But on a larger scale, I really like engaging in conversation about the binary. Why do we have it? What is the purpose? Why does this thing have to be? It's a social construct, meaning we make it, so why can't we change it?
Right, exactly. I mean, it's for everyone to decide on their own. And also that idea of like, I think I saw a TikTok the other day where someone was talking about like making a joke about people who had trouble with they, them pronouns. And they were like, you know, how can I like figure out how to say they, them? Like, that's so dumb. It's he or she. Like, that's the easiest thing in the world. And then he like looks down and he sees a wallet and he's like, oh, someone dropped their wallet. I hope they don't like lose it. I hope that I can give this back to them. Anyways, so they, them is so stupid. And I was like, that makes so much sense. Like, you use it all the time. It's like, it's that, it goes back to the idea of like what's easiest for us individually. If the idea of having to accept that there really is no specific like binary for anyone, and if someone decides that they are non-binary, that they are non-binary, and that's it. But for a lot of people, the idea of it not being black or white, quite literally, is like too much for their brains to handle, and it's not easy to, like, it requires extra thought for some people. And that idea of having extra thought is just like, why am I doing this? Like, this doesn't help me. It like affects me. It hurts me. Having to say they, them takes extra time out of my sentence. The tiny millisecond it takes for me to use the proper pronouns or to ask is like so much more difficult than just saying he or she. And I find that super interesting as a whole. It's just like, why does it matter? But in the same way, I also don't want to erase the fact that it does matter to some people, and some people who are trans are really like, I really believe that I am a woman, and that binary is really important to me. And so there's that conversation too of like, you also don't want to erase the journey that someone's taken to get to that binary place, but also you want to give the freedom to anybody else who doesn't feel like they fit either or to sit in the middle.
So what it does come back to is the concept of personal freedom, and we are living in a time and space where the concept of personal freedom is directly put against this concept of individualism, which are not actually the same thing, even though they sound like they should be the same thing. So it's like there is the concept of putting myself above everything else because I am, you know, from an ego mindset, the thing to be. But then there's that underlying drive for humans as relational beings to seek connection. And so we're constantly kind of warring within ourselves because of what society says versus what our innate human nature is calling us to do.
Right.
So that's where a lot of the fear and the confusion is coming from for everyone, because there is, you know, within themselves a dissonance.
Right. Yeah, it's that idea that like you have to, kind of like Cornelius in the book, where it's, he can't live in like harmony with either or, like he can't love people who are in the districts and be a part of the capital. He's got to find, like he was in that place of back and forth, and it was too chaotic for him. He like couldn't do it. He needed to put things into boxes. And that's such a human thing for us to do too, is we want freedom. And like even myself, like I recently came out as bisexual, and like that for me was like, you know, a big deal. Like, oh, finally I have like an answer to like who I am as a person. And now I have a community of people who are just like me. And it's like that need to be a part of a community and a part of a group is such a human thing, because we want so badly to have acceptance and validity. And for some reason that requires someone else to also say it to us. Like, I feel like I didn't think I was a valid bisexual until another gay person was like, yeah, like you're bisexual, cool, like we accept you. And I was like, sick, awesome, I'm valid, let's go. Or like on Instagram, where it's like, I think this picture is really pretty, but it's not until you get like a certain amount of likes that you're like, oh, clearly everyone else thinks that, so it is. Yep. And it's that conversation of like, I don't need anyone, I'm a bad bitch, like I can do what I want, but also I'm like super soft and I like need someone to tell me that I'm right. And so it's that constant back and forth of feeling like you want your individual freedom and that you can live your life however you want it, and at the same time also needing a group of people and validity to make it feel like it's real, on top of the fact that we also have a government that like decides things for us. So there's also that where you know, you might be accepted by literally everyone, and the only person that doesn't accept you is the government, who is your rich, horrible ass parent, who's just like, LOL, you're not going to be able to live though because you need me, huh? And it's that back and forth of like, you can't have one without the other in the way that our society has been constructed.
In the way that we have constructed our society.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we run with it too. It's like, you know, it's constructed, and then we naturally, because it's around us, and it's that environment conversation of, you know, because it's around us, no matter how hard we push against it, we also naturally fall into it because it's what's easy to us as people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's what's known. I mean, we are set to endure certain things, and we all have different access to layers of privilege. So based on how close to centered we are, you know, it's comfortable for a lot of people to just allow the status quo to be maintained. I mean, that's how we got to 2020.
Right, exactly. And the idea of doing anything else is like, oh, whoa. Like,
terrifying.
it's terrifying. And I feel like so many people who are like against the trans community or against the Black community, I think it all comes down to fear and that feeling of first that everything is changing and everything that they've known and their grandparents have known, like, you know, conversations that they're having with their family has been the same for years because our society was created on these foundations. And so the idea of flipping it upside down is like, whoa, like, like I did not sign up for a dystopian future. Absolutely not. Like, let's just keep it what it is. It's totally chill. And I also, because of that individualistic nature that we have, it's that idea of to help someone else means to take from me. And I've worked hard and I've done this and I've had troubles in my life. So by acknowledging these people, it means that I lose something. And that's a problem for me. So I'm just not gonna do it. I accept you, but like,
not really.
If you take from me, I don't. And it's very similar to Cornelius's thing where he's like, I accept Lucy. Love her to pieces. She's a saint. But I don't like this. So.
But she has the power to harm me, and therefore she must be eliminated.
Well, even if in his own, like, ignorance of, like, her being able to fish or her being able to start a fire, these are things that he didn't know. And instead of being like, oh, these are things that I've never learned, let me try to learn them. Like, clearly she's picked up different things that I've picked up. His immediate reaction was like, I don't know these because I'm better than her. It's because I've had a better, he like straight up was like, it's because I'm the shit. And I literally laughed at that line. I was like, oh my God, you are so self-absorbed. Like, it's so twisted. But that's the thing, is that he makes the excuses for himself where he's like, oh, I don't know how to do it, not because I haven't been taught. And there's nothing wrong with him not knowing how to do it. It's okay to not know. But he chalks it up to him being better than her because he's never needed to be like an animal like she is.
Yeah.
And then clearly there are two very different people all of a sudden. And he like can't have it anymore. So it's that constant like feeling of like, oh, I can't do this. And this takes away from me. So therefore I'm better. And there is the separation of people.
Mm-hmm.
2020, man.
All over the place.
Wow.
Oh, goodness.
Well, yeah. 2020 is not all bad though, because look at you.
Yeah.
I mean, trucking along. It's been an interesting 2020.
It has. There's lots happening, and there's lots of good, especially if you know where to look. I mean, you just released on last Friday, right? Your fourth
single, and then also the EP, same day.
Yeah.
We said every beats.
Tell us a bit about
So it's a 4-song EP. And because I'm a book reader, it is the first book in a series of books. So this is the first book. It's called Letters I Never Sent. And it is a conversation on heartbreak and love and loss and kind of making mistakes, owning up to them, and trying to process what that means as a person. I realized I like made a mistake and hurt somebody that I cared about, and realized very quickly that, oh my God, I'm the bad guy in someone else's story. And that was the first time that I ever really looked at it, is I like to think that I'm a good person. But in reality, like, I make mistakes, and I've just avoided thinking that I made any mistakes ever. It's always easy to like get out of a relationship and be like, well, they did this and they did that, so I'm the shit. And in this one, I was like, oh my God, like I hurt this person, and like their storyline for their life is going to start with this heartbreak and then go somewhere else. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm the villain. I'm the bad guy. Holy shit. But I think it's what you do with those mistakes and how you take those in that kind of defines who you are as a person. And so I was kind of like, okay, I made a mistake. It wasn't right. How do I either fix it or at least learn from it? And it was kind of a spiraling effect where I didn't mean to. And that was kind of the realization that I made a mistake. We did More in the Living, and that was like okay, I've clearly lost this friend and that's the end of that relationship, and kind of mourning that person's presence in my life. We did love songs, which is kind of reminiscing on the happy times, because I feel like that's the best way to move forward, is looking at both the bad times and the good times so that you can kind of fully get over it. And then we come to Emotional, which is the last single on the EP. And that one's just kind of like, it's got pieces of the breakup where you're still recognizing that someone was harmed, but this one's more introspective and just kind of looking at myself. I do this with every relationship that I'm in, whether it's friendships or relationships or family members. I'm a very introspective person, so I'm constantly like, okay, well, how was I affecting this person's existence? And kind of was starting to ask myself these questions, you know, why did I feel, I would tell my friends about it, and they'd be like, well, yeah, that was a really shitty thing that you did, but like, I don't know why you're so upset about it. Like, just let it go. But I just couldn't, I felt so guilty for being that person that I was just like, I can't, this feels like I like killed off a part of my personality. Like, this is so horrible. And in the same breath, that relationship when it first started felt like a full-blown, like so intense, so exciting, so happy. And I was just like, why does everything feel like two extremes? Like it's that idea of, why can't we find balance between the two? Why am I constantly like, if I'm happy, I'm up here. If I'm sad, I'm down here. We're never like in between. We're crying over everything. So it was that conversation of just asking, like, why do I feel so emotional? And also not having an answer. I think sometimes it's nice to not know. And when I wrote the song, I didn't have an answer. I just had the question. And I think that was like a really great ending to that chapter. And I think it also goes into the next book really well, as we start to kind of dive into that question and see why it is the way that it is. But I'm really happy about it. I'm really happy it's out and people have it. And it's really nice because I feel like everything is so like, because I'm existing in this person, everything is first person for me. So everything feels like it's directly happening to me. So when I write the songs and I put them out and somebody else hears it and they're like, hey, like, you didn't invent being sad. Like, I also feel sad. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, sick. I'm not alone. That's nice. So that's always a really nice feeling, is when somebody else can kind of connect to it and, you know, it can help someone else, which is the whole point of why I make music anyway.
Oh, that's beautiful. So where can we send people then to hear your work?
Pretty much anywhere that plays music. I'm on Spotify. I'm on Apple Music. I'm on SoundCloud. I'm on YouTube. I'm on like all of the social medias. So if you've got it, I probably am on there.
Perfect. Then we will definitely drop some links for people to be able to check those things out.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time in the space to talk through these things with us. As far as this conversation, do you have any questions for us, or is there anything that you thought that we might talk about that didn't come up?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm glad that we had this conversation. I really, really like talking in depth. I mean, I like talking about my music, but I also like talking about books and like being able to talk in depth with other people, not just about like the books themselves, but like really picking them apart and trying to find the question that is the foundation for the entire book. And I feel like right now with so many of these books in the young adult world and in this kind of like dystopian society where we're looking at humanity, I feel like the conversations are really relevant to right now. And I love that we can like get on here and talk about those conversations. It's way more entertaining than being like, here's my music, blah, 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 blah. Just another white girl on Spotify. I'd much rather talk about, you know, other people's struggles and kind of how to call light to those and, you know, kind of continue the conversation forward and just educate myself even more on things that I don't directly affect me, which I think is, you know, super important. And like right now, I feel like books are a really great place to figure that out. I've done a lot of reading in the last, few months, so I feel like it's a special place, and hopefully the Harry Potter community can kind of come together and help each other out. I've been seeing I'm big into TikTok. I get lost on there quite a bit. I found Book Talk groundbreaking. It's literally people just making TikToks about books, and it's fantastic. Highly recommend. It's like the best. But I've seen a lot of people making jokes where they're just like, I can't believe Harry Potter wrote Harry Potter. That's incredible. I can't believe Luna Lovegood invented Harry Potter. This is incredible. But I think my only question for you guys is, what are your Hogwarts houses?
Oh, I'm a Hufflepuff.
Ravenclaw.
Hey, love it. My dad's a Hufflepuff.
Yeah.
I feel like people sleep on the Hufflepuff community.
Yeah.
I feel like Hufflepuffs are like gentle flowers that could also like beat the shit out of you.
I mean, badgers.
No, I'm
He's like, yeah, I would do that.
No, she's terrifying. She's all about peace and love and acceptance, but also teeth and claws.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
you have to have both. Like, I'm very much embracing the duality of my nature, and I'm good with that. I like light as much as I can, but I'm not afraid of my shadows either. So
Love that. That's fucking incredible. I love that.
Oh my goodness. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank you
anyone
so much.
is listening, we are going to be able to link over to Sarah's accounts in the credits, so make sure that you head over to her socials and give her some likes.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. This was so much fun.
This was really fun. Thank you for being here.
Of course, anytime. I'm super down.
All right, beautiful.
There's my dog in the background.
Then until next time, we will keep our ears out for new stuff, and I hope that we get to do this again in the future.
I'm super down. Anytime.
Oh, perfect. Well, you ladies have a great weekend, and I will make sure that you get all of the links for this when we put everything out on Tuesday.
Amazing.
So your team can do whatever you need to do on your end.
Yay! I'm excited.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And we'll talk later.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening. You can join the conversation in our Facebook group. The page, facebook.com/realbooked, will direct you there.
And you can always email us directly at realbooked@gmail.com. Be sure to head over to Spotify or SoundCloud and check out Sarah's EP. Also, she would love to have you as an Instagram follower. You can find her on Instagram, /Sarah Barrios.
All music in this episode provided by purple-planet.com.
Hope we hear from you soon.